part of that. But my question would be, what are we doing to ensure that Christians and other minority religions are not subjected to a increased repression? The International U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom said that the situation for Christians, quote, worsened in the past year. In like manner, we're seeing the same thing in Pakistan. We all know that Pakistan's Minister for Minority Affairs, Shahbaz Bhatti, was assassinated, a terrible, terrible loss. He was opposing the blasphemy laws in Pakistan, and we know that other faiths, including the Hindus, it's been reported by the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan that 20 to 25 Hindu girls are abducted and converted to Islam every month. And I just chaired a hearing about Coptic Christian girls, a 3-hour hearing focused on, and distinguished chairwoman was at that hearing. It was riveting that we now see in Egypt that young teenage girls who happen to be Coptic Christians are abducted in their teenage years, 12, 13, 14 years old, and then they are forced into Islam, and then they are sold or given in marriage at age 18 to an Islamic man. There's even a very pathetic expression that they are Islamicizing the womb. In other words, they get a woman and they get any children she subsequently bears to be a member of the Islamic faith, all by coercion, all by kidnapping. And I haven't heard anything, frankly, from the administration on that, but that is Egypt, and perhaps you want to speak to that. But this deteriorating situation on religious freedom, and that is, as we all know, a fundamental tenet of human rights, and it is getting worse. And finally, piggyback, I want to associate my remarks about the dual standard or double standard with regards to Cuba. Fidel Castro is really given, I think, a large pass for his egregious human rights abuses in a way that is similar to what happens with Hu Jintao. Hu Jintao got a state dinner. Nobody has repressed human rights more than the president of China, Hu Jintao, and yet he was feted and treated with great honors where he should have been held to account for his egregious violations. I would ask, before yielding to your answer, please pick up the phone and call the foreign minister of China and ask, where is Chen Guangcheng? Next Wednesday, I'm chairing an emergency hearing at the China Commission. There have been rumors, reports, we don't know if they're true, that he may have been beaten to death. As you recall, he is the blind activist lawyer, I know you know all about him, who has stood up for women who are being coerced into forced abortions and forced sterilizations in Linyi province. He took on their case, and the full fist, the iron fist of the Chinese dictatorship has ever since, years in prison and now under house arrest. Now we hear he may have been beaten to death. We don't know, but please call the foreign minister on that if you would, Madam Secretary.
Well, Congressman, I share not only your concerns, but your outrage over what we are seeing happening. We will follow up on your request to China. And specifically on the question of persecution, obviously what we're seeing is deeply distressing. And it's not only against Christians or against Hindus, it's also against different sects of Muslims. I mean, there are Islamic sects in Afghanistan and Pakistan and elsewhere. They're also discriminated against, persecuted, and their adherents brutally treated. This is one of our biggest problems in the world right now, is there needs to be a greater acceptance of religious tolerance, and in so many places there is no history of religious tolerance. And I am searching for ways to be effective. You know, one of the things that we tried very hard to do is to work with a number of countries, including Muslim-majority countries, the Organization of Islamic Conference, to begin to change the dialogue from something they wanted to call religious defamation, which would be a legal rationale for persecuting people who spoke out about their own religion or criticized someone else's, to a broad acceptance that there needs to be an equation between freedom of speech and freedom of religion. I mean, we are trying many different approaches, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And I thank Mr. Smith. Mr. Sherman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, for coming before us. I hear you have a busy schedule, and I missed your opening statement for the same reason as the ranking member. All politics is local, and our districts are co-located. My first question or matter relates to the Sindh province of Pakistan, and you may just want to respond for the record because that isn't one of the hot issues, but the Sindhis have been influenced by the Sufi strain of Islam. They have moderate values, harmonious with American ideals. And I would hope that we would do all we could for rural Sindh that is suffering from this year's floods, which are on top of last year's floods, and that you would speak to the Pakistanis. You have so many issues to cover with them, but one are the disappearances of Sindhi activists in southern Pakistan. In this committee room, we dealt with the authorization bill. It may never become law, but it does reflect whatever wisdom there is on this side of the room. And we took a look at the Voice of America, which has a budget of $750 million. And I believe it was unanimous to direct the Voice of America to spend at least $1.5 million of that. And we're talking about a small amount of money, broadcasting in the Sindhi language. Further research indicates that the best way to reach the people of Sindh would be on AM or medium wave broadcasts originating from the UAE. Now, we already broadcast in Urdu into Pakistan, but the Sindhi language is spoken by far more people than the Urdu language. And while the Urdu language may be the language of preference by Islamabad, the language spoken in the homes in southern Pakistan is Sindhi. So I don't know if you have a comment on that or would just want to take that under advisement.
No, I think that's a very useful suggestion, and I will get back to you for the record.
I appreciate that. I think many of us saw this ad about Camp Ashraf featuring a 14-year-old girl who fears extermination. We face a tough circumstance in that we are withdrawing from Iraq. In the past, there have been, some would say massacres, at least terrible instances in which tens of people have been killed. And there are press reports that the Iraqi officials say, well, don't worry about it too much. After all, these folks are on the U.S. terrorist list. What are we doing to assure that when we leave Iraq, we will not see the massacre of 3,400 people at Camp Ashraf? And how's it going on the court-ordered review of whether the MEK should be on the terrorist list?
On those points in particular, Congressman, in accordance with the D.C. Circuit's 2010 ruling, the State Department is reviewing the designation. There will be a decision. It has to be done expeditiously but thoroughly, and we hope to have such a decision in the future. I would add that the current designation does not pose a bar to the resettlement of Ashraf residents in Europe, and the humanitarian situation at Ashraf, in our opinion, is also not related to the MEK's designation. And I think it's also important to recognize that we need to do as much as we can to move as many people out of the camp before the end of the year, and we are trying to do that. We're working primarily through the United Nations, and certainly with both the residents of Ashraf and the government of Iraq to try to put in place a very rapid assessment of individuals, and we have urged the EU and other countries to favorably consider the resettling of any Ashraf resident granted refugee status, because we want to shrink the numbers as best we can.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Sherman. Mr. Rohrabacher is recognized.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Madam Secretary. And let me just note for the record that the chairwoman is not the only person who is deeply concerned about the Castro regime and the brutality and the horrible repercussions that we have suffered because we have permitted this gangster to ally himself with all of the hostile elements of the world and the hemisphere. So we shouldn't take that lightly, and don't think of it just as the chairman's cause, but our cause. Second of all, you stated that we're going to do as much as we can in terms of Camp Ashraf. You are not doing as much as you can. It's been 500 days since the court was ordered us to reconsider this terrorist designation, and that should be plenty of time to understand what the issues are. And other people around the world now have determined that they don't put them on the terrorist list, so we are not doing as much as we can. And I would hope that you take that up and do as much as you can to ensure there's not another massacre of people there that we could have prevented. Let's note that we have officially requested the State Department for information about the Camp Ashraf massacre. Do you intend to comply with that request as we have been told the State Department will, or are you backtracking from that commitment?
Well, Congressman, we will provide what information we can to you.
We can sounds like the operative words of how to get out of answering a question. You obviously have the records of your own department. Are you going to provide it? You have a request from Congress. You have agreed to do it. And will you comply with that request?
We certainly will comply with the request.
Okay, thank you.
But I cannot tell you what will be in the reply.
That's not.
So that is the qualification of my answer.
All right. There are Libyan funds that are frozen in the United States right now. How much did we spend to help the Libyans defeat their tyrant? And I don't think it would be at all inappropriate for us to, at this time of economic crisis in the United States, to freeze some of those funds, or some of those funds that are frozen, to put our request in to be repaid for what we did to help the Libyans win their freedom. Are we planning anything like that?
Well, I think, Congressman, the latest figures that I have is about $1 billion was spent. And, you know, I'm sure the Defense Department would, that's really their money. So I will wait to see what their final figures are. But we are in discussions with the Libyans about a number of issues that they have requested help from us. And it's a little challenging until they get a government, which, as you know, they don't officially have. And we're going to look to see how we can best coordinate and organize any kind of reimbursement for certain functions that we have performed. But there's been no decisions because there's no government yet to negotiate with.
Let me suggest that it would be, I think, a very defendable policy, if not an admirable policy in terms of what the people of the United States might think, for us to ask for compensation at a time when we are borrowing money, $1.5 trillion a year. It's not right for us to borrow money from somebody else in order to help another group of people free themselves and put our people in debt for that. We should, if possible, the Libyans have enormous assets. We should require people like this to be able to repay us if we expect the American people to continue to support the cause of freedom throughout the world. And with that said, let me just note, and I know there's been a lot of talk about this lately, I do not blame the president at all, and I am not here to talk about the job you're doing in terms of trying to pull back from the missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. The call for extending our deployment in Iraq, I do not believe reflects